All right, thank you for the webinar on MRP, which is Material Requirements Planning. So, if you're a business that's struggling to calculate how much inventory to purchase or produce to ensure you have optimized inventory levels to fulfill customer demand, then this webinar is for you. Perhaps you're still handling this manually or even outside of SAP Business One. For example, maybe you're collecting and analyzing all this data in Microsoft Excel. And that can be an onerous and time-consuming task, especially if you manage thousands of items with various sources of demand. So SAP basically makes this all easy for you. It makes the inventory planning easy with MRP. And this simple yet powerful tool can quickly and effortlessly calculate optimal inventory levels and make purchase orders or production orders within seconds. It also recognizes trends, and it can produce forecasts based on historical sales data. And moreover, it can consider minimum, maximum, and required inventory levels, lead times, and consider sales order demand with its MRP calculations. So let's just dive in. So what's on the agenda today? Let me just minimize the screen here. There are some prerequisites. Fortunately, it's very quick and easy to set up. We'll just review the checklist before for defining MRP subject items. And then we'll walk through the MRP Wizard, which is basically 6 easy steps. It's a guided wizard, and we'll go through that step by step. And then we'll apply forecasts. So we'll easily generate and apply forecasts based on historical sales data. And it's all about order recommendations. So we want to let the system do all the calculations for you. And then we want to view it in an easy to understand order recommendation window. And then we're going to auto-generate some purchase orders, production orders, and you can even do inventory transfer requests as well. And then what we'll do is we'll top things off with Q&A. We'll end things off with Q&A. So is there any setup? So fortunately, it's, like I said, it's very easy to get started using MRP. Let's take a look at SAP Business One. So let's take a look at the MRP module. Now, as you know, there's an MRP module here in the main menu. What I've done was I've actually dragged the MRP Wizard right into my common function window. So if you have a common function window, it's a great shortcut to your MRP Wizard. I've also got a shortcut to the item master data, and this is where we're going to get started with our prerequisites. So if I click on the item master data and I look for a certain item, look for this one here, there's a few tabs you want to go to. The first tab we want to probably take a look at is the planning data tab. So within the planning data tab, there are a few fields that you need to fill out. For example, if this item, this backup power generator item, if I want it to be subject to MRP, then I need to select MRP in the drop-down list here. And I need to select my procurement method. So this is an item that I buy versus make. It's not a production item, it's a procured item. So I'm going to select buy. And then we have a couple of other fields as well. So you have order interval. So for example, I could order this every week, monthly. I could define my own interval, my own desired interval. So this is useful if you have an agreement with a vendor to purchase an item every Monday, for example. You can set up your order intervals in there. Order multiple. So you would put a quantity in here. So for example, if the value is 12, the item will be ordered in multiples of 12. So if you need 20 items and the value is 12, then MRP is going to recommend 24 items in the results. Minimum order quantity. So for example, we could put 100 in here. So when the value is 100 and you need 80 to meet a sales order demand, MRP is going to recommend you purchase 100 to satisfy the demand, as well as the definition for minimum order quantities. Checking rule. This is actually specific only to the HANA version of SAP Business One. And it's only, so we're going to skip this. Now the lead time, You want to put the number of days in here. So for example, if I'm purchasing something overseas and I know it's going to take 10 days, for example, I'm going to enter that in here. So for example, the lead time is, let's say 3 days. MRP will issue the purchase or production order for that child item with a due date that is 3 days prior to the due date for the parent item. And then you have a tolerance day field here as well. And so I can enter, for example, 2 days to consider late supply from my vendor by 2 days. The other tab we want to take a look at is the inventory data tab, specifically on the right here. So a lot of the times we want to have a minimum inventory or maybe even a maximum inventory requirement. So at all times, I want to ensure that I have a minimum inventory of 125 units and a maximum of 1,000 units. And if I ever dip below or above my min and max, I'll actually receive an alert by SAP indicating that I'm below my minimum and that I should purchase more. And so when we run our MRP, it's actually going to consider this as well. We have the option to consider minimum maximum. Okay, so let's run through we're going to start things off in baby steps. We're going to start off with a very simple MRP scenario. So the first scenario is we're going to basically purchase an item. We need to purchase some items, and we're going to base it on some sales order demand in the system. And we're going to probably base it on some minimum inventory requirements. And we'll eventually apply some forecasts to this first MRP scenario. Okay, so let's take a look at that in action. So if I close my item master data window and I open up my MRP Wizard here, step 1, and you'll see it here at the bottom left, you see you have different steps. You have steps 1 of 6 steps. So the first thing we have to do is create a scenario, an MRP scenario. Now you have a couple of buttons at the top here. You can create a brand new one from scratch, or you can select an existing scenario. And as you can see, I've got some existing scenarios here that I've used in the past, and we'll just use one of them. So for example, let's use the last one here. And then in step 2, we have to enter in our scenario details. And basically, within our scenario details, we need to define a planning horizon. In other words, what date do I want to consider within my MRP scenario? So I want to consider from July 1st, perhaps all the way to December 31st. Now, you could do this, based on the whole year. Some people might want to do an MRP run for the entire year. Some people want to do it for quarters. In this case, we're just going to do it from now to the end of the year. And I want to view this in months, but you have the option of viewing it in days, weeks, and months, basically our results. Now, if you set up your holiday calendar, you can consider the holiday calendar for production items and for purchase items. In case you're wondering where that is, it's under administration. I'll just quickly take a look at it here. So we have a holiday calendar. I've created a holiday calendar for 2018. So you can see I've got all of these different dates here. And so it makes sense if you want to select to consider certain days for holidays. So for example, if I consider Christmas, then it's going to extend the number of days in my results. Now, you have some other check boxes here as well. You can ignore cumulative lead times, and you have some display preferences as well. You can sort by assembly sequence, item number, item description, and item group. And you can also run simulations. So you can run this as many times. You can have a whole bunch of ad hoc scenarios, and you can run simulations. Now, the next step here is to select your items. What items do I want to consider in my MRP scenario? So you have a lot of options here. So if you want to say all items, it'll consider all the items in your system. But what most people want to do is they want to break it down maybe by item group. They want to do an MRP run by item properties. And at the most granular level, you can do it by a specific item. So for today's demonstration purposes, we're just going to select one item, so that's just easy to see in the results. So I've selected my backup power generator. I want to basically, again, go back. I want to see how much I need to purchase of my how many backup generators I need to purchase within this time horizon, this planning horizon. And the next step is, what inventory warehouses do I want to consider? What are my data sources? So you have a couple of options here. You can do it by company or by warehouse. So if you do it by company, it's going to consider the quantities of existing inventory, demand and supply. It's all consolidated and the recommendations are made to the default warehouse. Whereas if you choose by warehouse, it's going to consider for each warehouse the existing inventory, demand, supply, and recommendations are going to be calculated separately. So one thing to note here is if you want to create inventory transfer requests, then you need to select the warehouse option. So in this case, I want to consider all of these warehouses at the company level. And now we go into our document data source. So this is where I basically ask myself, what documents do I want to consider within my MRP calculations? So we have various sources of demand and supply. So we can look at the system to check if there's any backup generators in existing purchase requests and purchase quotations, purchase orders. Do I have any blanket agreements containing this item? Do I have any sales quotations, sales orders, production orders, inventory transfer requests, et cetera, with that particular item? So in this case, I only want to consider sales orders that have that item, S00002, my backup generators. I can also restrict certain sales orders. So for example, if I check this box and I want to look at what the system's going to do is it's actually going to spit out all of the sales orders that have this item on them. And it's going to ask you, hey, do you want to consider or exclude these documents from your MRP calculation? And if I wanted to, I can select which ones I want to exclude. Right? But in this case, I'm not going to restrict any sales orders. What most customers do, they might restrict certain purchase orders because they know that some purchase orders are already en route, some are maybe on a container somewhere on the ocean, and maybe they want to exclude the ones that are already coming in from their MRP calculation, right? So I want to look at only sales orders, but I also want to consider my minimum inventory level, right? So if you recall, if we go back here, if I drill into this item, if you recall, under my inventory data tab, I've got a minimum inventory requirement of 125 units. So I want the MRP calculation to consider that. So I'm gonna select minimum inventory. I also want the system to create purchase orders. Now you have the option of creating purchase requests. And if this was a production item, an item that I manufacture, then it would spit out a production order. It would recommend production orders. But in this case, I just want to auto-generate purchase orders based on my demand. What you also can do is you have the option of including forecasts. So remember what I said before, you could apply a forecast based on last year's sales data to my MRP calculation. Well, we can apply a forecast, but we'll do that a little bit later on. In our first run, we want to do it just based on sales orders and minimum inventory requirements. So first, let's make sure we have a sales order in the system. I believe I've got a sales order for item S00002 for a quantity of 700. So what MRP should do is it's going to look at this sales order in the system for 700 units. It's also going to consider the minimum inventory requirements of 125, and it should recommend that I purchase 825 units. But let's take a look. Let's run this. And as you can see here in my MRP results, I'm just going to expand this view. As you can see, in the month of July, it's recommending that 825 units. And if you're wondering why it's red because it's past due. Now, it's past due because I know I've got a lead time of 10 days. And it's saying I should have purchased this a long time ago in order to make sure that I can get the items in on time to fulfill that sales order, which was due on July 18th, right? So that the delivery date of that sales order was July 18th. I should have ordered this 10 days ago in order to fulfill that sales order, right? So that's why that number is red. So I can actually click on this number here, and it's going to actually give me some pegging information. It's going to say, you should have a purchase order created for 825 units, right? And if you look at the demand field here, that demand field will actually tell you it's based on the demand of 700 units on that sales order. But the 125, remember, that comes from our minimum inventory, right? And you can see throughout the remaining months here, August, September, October, November, December, it's actually recommending that we purchase 125 units in those months just to ensure that we always have a minimum of 125 units in stock. If I click on the recommendations tab here, it's actually going to show me the purchase order that it's recommending I create, right? Now, I can save this and come back to this recommendation and then later automatically create this purchase order. So we'll do that. Now let's take it a step back. And let's do the same scenario now, but let's include a forecast this time. So everything's going to stay the same. We want to consider sales orders in our MRP calculation. We also want to consider the minimum inventory requirements. But this time, we also want to consider a forecast. Now you can see I've got some existing forecasts in the system, right? But in this case, I want to define a new forecast. And let's give it a name. Let's call it Q3 S0002. Something meaningful, right? Q3, that's right. Q3 and because it's Q3, I want the start and end date to be from July 1st to September 30th. And the item that I want to create a forecast for is S0002. Now, there's a button at the bottom here that says Generate Forecast. You have a few options here. You can create a basic forecast or an intelligent forecast. For those of you who are running the HANA version of SAP Business One, you will see both of these options. If you're running the SQL version, you're only going to see the basic forecast. So the intelligent forecast, like I said, that's for HANA users. We'll do another webinar on that one. That's a whole nother webinar in itself. But today, we're going to generate a forecast, a basic forecast based on last year's sales data. So what I'm going to say here is you can select items by item, by preferred vendor, by default warehouse. You can even do it by item group or item properties. In this particular scenario, I'm just going to do it for S00 for this one particular item, just so it makes it easier to view in our demo. Now, again, you do have the option of doing it by item group. So if I had an item group called widgets, you can create an item group called widgets, and it would spit out all of those item codes and do a forecast for all of those item codes that belong to that item group. Under advanced settings, we have a couple of options here. So I want to base my sales history, first of all, on sales orders. You could do it by deliveries or AR invoices, but we're going to choose sales orders. And you have a couple of options. You can do it by simple average or monthly average. Now, simple average, for example, it basically, it sums up all of the quantities sold on sales orders and divides it by the respective number of months, right? So for example, if I did the forecast for the entire year for 12 months and I sold 120 for the whole year, I would divide that by 12 and I would get an average of 10, a simple average of 10. But in this case, I want to do monthly history. So in this case, it's going to consider the amount or the quantities sold, in this case for July and August and September of last year, right? And now I want to put in my history date. So I want to say from July 1st of 2017, actually I can just write it in, 07/01, 2017 to 09/30, 2017. Now if I click OK, it's going to populate my forecast fields for July, August, September with the respective quantities that were sold in those months last year. So this is really great, especially if even your salespeople could use this forecasting tool. The beauty behind this is that all your data already exists in SAP Business One. So if you want to generate a forecast based on last year's sales data, maybe your salespeople want to use this tool, but they can also use this percentage button up here to either increase or decrease. So maybe I want to increase it by, maybe 20%. So select here, increase that by 20%. And you can see if I increase it by 20%, it's automatically increased the quantities by 20% here as well. So it's a great tool also for not just procurement personnel, but also for salespeople. If they want to figure out what their projected sales forecasts are for this year or next year based on previous year's data, sales data. Okay, but we're just going to put this back to 0. We want to base it off of last year's data. Now we're going to say add. Okay, so now I've added this sales forecast to my document data source in step 5 of the wizard. Now, if I run this and I expand that, you can see that it's actually making a recommendation of 1,325 units. And again, the demand is because I have 700 units on that sales order in July, but it's also got, remember, the 125 minimum inventory requirements, plus I've got, 500 that I need to bring in August as well, because I know I have a demand of 500 in August 1st, because it's also considering my lead time as well, 10 days. So I need to purchase this now in order to fulfill my sales forecast of 500 in August as well. That's why it's recommending 1,325 that I need to bring in. And again, if you look at the remaining months, it's also spitting out the projected forecast for July, August, September. Remember in September, I was projecting 600 in my forecast plus my minimum inventory, which brings me to 725 units. Okay. What you can also do is apply multiple forecasts. So you have an option here to apply multiple forecasts. So you can see here, I've got a forecast for Q3 and Q4. If I select that, these two forecasts, it's going to consider that in my results as well. So if I run it, you can see it's taking those two forecasts and considering that in my MRP results as well. So again, a really nice way of calculating and doing the number crunching using forecast, looking at demand in the system, looking at minimum inventory requirements. So think about how much time you're saving and how long it's currently taking you to do all that number crunching. You're probably looking at all your sales orders in the system. Maybe you're looking at your quotations as well. What's on my blanket agreements? What are my inventory, minimum and maximum requirements? What's my lead time? When do I need to purchase these things? MRP does all the math for you. It does all the calculations and thinking for you. So what normally would take you maybe hours or days, if not weeks, you can actually do this in seconds, if not minutes, okay? Now, let's take a look at another scenario here. So this scenario we took a look, we just looked at here was based on what I need to purchase. But what if I'm a manufacturer and I need to figure out what I need to produce? So the second scenario would be based on production orders. For example, what production orders needs to be created based on my demand? Moreover, let's determine what purchase orders need to be created to ensure we have enough raw materials to produce our finished goods. So let's take a look. Let's create an order in the system for a production order item. Might already have one in the system. Oh, yes, I do. So here's a sales order with a production bill of material item. If I were to drill into this item, I can see that this production item is composed or comprised of 4 items here: a hose, a clamp, and a valve, and even some labor as well. So here are the respective quantities. For the hose, I need 100. For the clamp, I need 20. For the valve, I need 5, right? So with this sales order, we know we have demand in the system. Now let's run an MRP scenario. Let's figure out what I need to purchase in terms of raw materials and what production orders I need to create based on my demand here. So let's go back to our MRP Wizard. I actually have an existing scenario called B1. And again, I'm running it from July 1st to December 31st. I want to view it in months. The item I want to consider in this wizard or this scenario is just this one item here. I want to look at all my different warehouses, but I want to do it at the company level. And in this case, the document data source that I want to consider are sales orders and production orders. I could do inventory levels and forecasts, but I'll exclude that for now, just so that it's easier to see in my results. So let's take a look at that. Let's run it. Okay. So let's expand that. Let's just make this a little wider. Okay. So maybe I will expand one field at a time here. So you can see here, the one here, it's recommending that we create one production order. And it's also recommending that I purchase some of these raw materials in order to create that production order. So if I expand this here, you can see that if I click on the supply for 20, it's saying you need to create a purchase order for a quantity of 20. And the demand is because I have a MRP requirement or a sales order for that purchase order that requires 20 of that raw material. And if I expand the rest of the other raw materials as well, you'll see the same thing. So for the hose, again, it's recommending that we create a purchase order for 100 because there's a demand for 100 because we need 100 hoses to create that one production order or that one finished good. Same thing with our valve. It's recommending that we create a PO for a quantity of 5 because to create that one finished good, we require 5 valves, okay? So now that we see our results and we're happy with the results, what we want to do is actually automatically generate our production order and our purchase order for these respective items, right? So there's a couple of ways of doing this. We can save the, first of all, let's save the recommendation, right? We save that recommendation because maybe we close the screen or we go to lunch and we want to save that recommendation so we can come back and it'll save the results here. After we save it, we can go up to where it says go to, and we can go to the order recommendation screen. And in the order recommendation screen, you can see here are the 3 documents that it's telling us to create automatically. I've got 3 different purchase orders, and I've got 1 production order on the second row here. I can click on the top of that column to select all 4. And what it's going to do, if I click on update, it's actually going to create them. So it tells you I've created 1 new production order and 3 new purchase orders. I can actually close this screen and I can, first of all, view my purchase orders that were automatically created behind the scenes. So if I scroll to the last one or the last 3, you can see my clamp. There's 20 on a purchase order to this particular vendor. My valve, a quantity of 5 to this particular vendor. And my hose, a quantity of 100 feet to this particular vendor, right? If we take a look at the production order that was automatically created, we scroll to the last one, you can see the system automatically created this production order. And it's actually, if you look at this origin field here, it's actually stating that this was generated by MRP. So you can see here, it was generated today, today's date, for a quantity of 1. And here are the respective raw materials or child components of that production order, right? So again, the system did a few things for us, right? And when it's a bill of material item, or I should say a production order item, it's going to do 2 things. It's going to create purchase orders for the raw materials. Secondly, it's going to create the respective production order for that finished good. So all you need to do, obviously, is to fulfill that is go through your regular steps. I won't go through it today, but obviously you're going to receive your raw materials into the system, and then you're going to complete the production order process. You'll receive a finished good into the system, and then you can obviously take that sales order and convert it to a delivery and deliver out that bill of material to your customer, that production bill of material to your customer. Okay. Let me see if there's anything I missed here. So basically, in summary, what you really want to do, let's take a look at my PowerPoint here. We want to let the system do the work for you, right? We want to save time. We also want to eliminate human error, especially if you're doing everything outside of SAP Business One. We want to eliminate the possibility of any human error. You want to take advantage of consolidated buying power and take advantage of vendor volume pricing. So if you can consolidate all of your purchase orders together, then you can go to your vendor and say, hey, here's a massive purchase order for all of these requirements over the next few months or so, and then you can get some volume pricing or better pricing from your vendors. Ultimately, you want to have optimal inventory levels. You always want to be able to fulfill sales demand. You want to make sure that you have enough stock without overstocking your inventory, right? And ultimately, that's just going to increase customer satisfaction and revenues. So with that being said, that's it for today's webinar on MRP. I'd like to thank everybody for joining.